This cylinder head, I took off this BF40, Honda BF40, because there was water in the oil, and I suspected a leaking head gasket. Well, it wasn't just a leaking head gasket. When I took the cylinder head off, I found it is severely damaged. The damage is corrosion. This is the third Honda BF50 or BF40. They're identical. BF40 and BF50 they are identical. I don't know if they're about the 45 and 35 or something, but I know at least those are identical, and they're interchangeable. Anyways, one head is actually from a BF40 and the other one from a BF50. Well, this particular head here is from the motor I'm just rebuilding or repairing, so to speak. I'm not going to completely rebuild the motor. For the most part, the motor is good. So there are several spots. Okay, there's here is corrosion damage, goes all the way into the area where the sealing surface of the head gasket would be. So there's no more sealing right here. There is another one right there. This is actually completely through already. So there's nothing you can do. You can't just clean it up and put a new head gasket on there, because there's gonna be already a gap under there. So the water jackets itself, they're kind of eaten up already, so you never really know if internally this thing is already leaking by. I tried to bring this cylinder head to a local metal fabricating shop where they do aluminum welding, and the guy looked at it and he said right off the back it's going to be probably around $200 or something, because the tremendous amount of work that goes into it. Still afterwards you still have to bring it to a machine shop and resurface everything. So you're looking at about $300 to repair this cylinder head, and you can only hope that there really is not any problems internally here what you can't really see, because then you would have to magnaflux this thing to make sure this is you can still use that head. So here's another close-up from this damage. You can clearly see there is actually a whole chunk missing here, right there. So to fix this, it would have to be completely welded up here, and then afterwards machined down again. And again, this area here, just as bad. I mean, there's like almost nothing left no more. So moving on to the second cylinder head. This is the one I just got, and this here is one from the first motor I started working, BF40, and it's in horrible condition as well. So heavy corrosion damage is right here in this water jacket, eating up into the sealing surface of the cylinder. Corrosion damage right here. So this could be debatable, because the overall surface here, except on this little area, you probably could get away with it reusing it. But here's a big issue. This whole water pocket here, this is from the outside. There's no chance in hell you can get this to seal up again. The water would, in the worst, well, in the least case, the water would just start pouring out of the side of the cylinder head. But is another problem. This is an oil port, I believe, and here's the water. So there's no material left here anymore. So this thing would also leak water in the oil and ultimately cause a severe engine failure. Here, another close-up. Again, this is the water jacket, and this is an oil port. There's no material between them. This should go right here. Overall, I believe, now this is just my opinion, so I understand there's lots of fanboys out there and they will defend it, but in my opinion there is something wrong with the way this motor is engineered. I don't know if it is that water just keeps remaining in the engine after it's shut off or something. I don't know. I don't have the experience with those motors. I started the first one in the beginning of this year, the 40 horsepower, and then that's why I started noticing those problems. So the same with this one here. I did have actually replacement head because I bought two engines, one for just parts, and so I was able to, the second motor that I bought for parts had a good cylinder head, had different issues, and I get to those issues here in a bit. But I want to talk about now about why those heads are corroding so horribly. And there could be a very simple reason for it, and that's called lack of maintenance. Everybody should know when you deal with boats, any type of boats, that you have to deal with zincs. I'm not going to get into why you put a zinc on there, because we should all know that. So from what I found, there's two crucial areas where this motor has replaceable zincs, and if they don't get replaced, then this can definitely happen, especially when you use it in salt water. Now fresh water, I don't know, maybe it wouldn't be that bad. So let's talk about where those zincs are. This is the intake manifold for the carburetors, and this is the spot where the zinc goes. It's just a round little cylindric, whatever you call it, piece of zinc. To replace it, you have to take the carburetors loose. Well, they come loose with the whole manifold. It's really not that much of work. It's not difficult. I think everybody can do it. All you need is a 10mm socket, driver, a screwdriver maybe. That's just about it. Anyway, so that's where that zinc is. Also, what I found out when I took this off, since I took the engines apart, both of those chambers here where the water goes through, they were jam-packed with all sorts of sand, little shells, typical stuff that you find in a beach area. So maybe there's also a problem with those motors are just gunking up with all sorts of debris, and that causes overheating issues. So, but to the zincs first. This one right there, mounted on the inside of your intake manifold. If you just acquired one of those motors, go the extra mile. If you plan on taking this thing out on salt water, take the carburetors off. You may have to replace the gasket. You can use silicone afterwards, but just replace the gasket, it's easier. And check for two things. Number one, the zinc is still in place, or not, at least not half eaten up. And if there's debris in there, you're gonna also find this debris right here, right there at your intake ports. So, and here's the coolant passages, and when they get clogged up, that motor will overheat. And it may still show water coming out of the P-hole because it's not attached to the cylinder head, which I should have probably, would have make much more sense, but they didn't. So it may be just perfectly fine peeing out the water, yet the motor starts overheating. And I believe they have an alarm on your controller. If that alarm goes off and shows that little LED turning red, take it serious. It's not a malfunction of the controller. It is detecting this thing is getting hot because it got a temperature sensor and an oil pressure sensor on top of the cylinder head or engine block. The second zinc I found, which in this case is still here, is right here. On the side of your engine block is your oil filter mount, and this is a cover for your coolant passage that's basically controlled by the thermostat. So again, take this off. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bolts in there. Now the only problem is this one I was able to take it off because this motor has not been in salt water from the way I thought it looked inside. This motor has different problems, which I get to in a few minutes. Anyways, I was able to take this cover off. If you can't take this cover off, you may have to put a little bit of heat to the bolts. Try to get them loose, but they may break. So it's kind of like you have to make a decision there. Do you take it off and check for the zinc? If you can't get it off, and just, well, hope for the best. But there's also another problem. This whole passage here in this area can also be clogged up with sand, debris, marine life, what have you. Again, this will cause overheatings. And your thermostat is under this cover here, right there, easy to get to. Again, make sure you don't break those two bolts off. In my case, I live in Florida. I take the thermostats out and leave them out because they're small, they're prone to fail. It doesn't take much for them to get jammed up with any sorts of debris, and then the motor overheats too. So if you can help it, if you're not in an area where the water is frigid, take the thermostat out and leave it out. It's better. It takes a couple more minutes to warm that motor up, but after that it won't make no difference anyways anymore, because under normal operating conditions that thermostat will stay wide open. Here's your two sending units. I believe this is the water temperature and this is the oil pressure. I just wanted to mention it. So now to this engine block and what is happening to this block itself. When I bought this motor here, I was hoping that I could actually use this block, since it seemed to be in much better shape than the other one I had. The person who sold it to me mentioned there is a couple head bolts were broken off and he didn't want to deal with it, and but he was honest about it. Well, broken off head bolts wouldn't be that big of a problem. The problem is the threads are stripped out of this cylinder block. Somebody tried to fix it by putting a helicoil in here, or helicoils or whatever. The way this thing is designed, it's not possible to do that, because those cylinder heads, they're using special bolts. They call them torque to yield or stretch bolts. So the way you put them on is You have to tighten them down first, I believe, to 27 foot-pounds, and after that you have to additionally crank them down by another 90 degrees. And believe it or not, this is an eerie feeling when you do that, because it really feels like at any given time you're going to snap that bolt off, or you strip the threads out, because it's just aluminum. So here's where the problem lies. You have to go by the specs. They give you a wear out spec. So those bolts, they have a certain service limit, and there's I don't know off top of my head, I measured it and made sure the ones I used were still good. So they give you in millimeter exactly how long those bolts can be in the max before you have to replace them. Because what happens if you reuse them too many times, which normally it shouldn't really happen in the first place, but let's say you did, or you got a set of used ones and they're stretched past the limit, what's going to happen is the gap or the thread becomes basically too wide, and so it's kind of like you don't have the right thread anymore to fit in the corresponding threads inside the cylinder head. So it may work, you may be able to start still putting them in. You're gonna notice you're gonna have some drag, but what's gonna happen is you're destroying then the threads in the engine block, and once you start then torquing it down, they will just rip out. And I believe this had happen here, because somebody also, I can clearly see, they try to this hole is oblong, they try to drill or whatever, maybe they've broken a stud out or bolt off, and I don't know what they did, but it's no good anymore. And there's not just this one here. Also got a helicoil in there. Again, you can't do that. You cannot put helicoils in something like that. It's never gonna work, so don't get the idea. The only fix for that would be, again, you would have to find a metal fabricating shop, and well, they would have to fill the holes completely out, welding them shut, and then would have to get machined back out. I mean, it has to be totally precise, because they have to be 100% straight, and then you have to machine new threads in there. I don't think it would be cost efficient to do that. So it's a shame, because the pistons look good, the cylinder walls look good on this engine, but I could use the crankshaft, I could use the pistons, but so far I have not encountered any problems with these things anyways. Not as far as that part goes. So the block is junk. I'm not even gonna try to sell it for fix or repair, because that would be insulting. So now back real quick to overheating problems. I know I'm jumping back and forth, but I'm just trying to get the information out here. So again, when I took this motor apart, that's how the block looked like, except those damages. It looked nice and clean inside. So I think this has probably never seen salt water, or the person who owned it at one point in time used in salt water and flushed it like you're supposed to. Yeah, that's what I want to say. People flush those engines, flush them very, very, very good. But the other motor I had, when I took the cylinder head off, this whole area here, right here, was completely filled with debris, sand, shells, barnacles, whatever could fit in there was in there. All the way, actually it went all the way up, and so I started scraping it all out and blowing through it and cleaning it out and what have you. So, and then P-hole, check hole, whatever you want to call it. I call it P-hole. It's right here. Now, if no water comes out there after you start up the motor, give it a few seconds, but water should be coming out. If it doesn't, first thing you do, take the hose off and take some kind of a needle, whatever fits in the, because there's a fitting in there with a hose barb on there, whatever you can get in that small hole, stick through it and see if you can clear it, and try it again. Sometimes what happens is it pees for a few seconds, maybe even a minute or so, and all of a sudden it starts drizzling. So next step is take this whole fitting out and then take a flashlight, because you can see it, and see what's in there. And there's a good chance there's a bunch of debris in there. So you could just start the motor up again and hope, since you now have a bigger hole, that it pushes the debris out. If it doesn't, then the problem is there's just crap just, again, caked up in here, right there. And it doesn't matter what you do, you're not going to get it out unless you use, I mean, I think there's some ways to decalcify those motors. It is quite a procedure. Regular flushing probably wouldn't do the trick unless you somehow power flush this thing. I wouldn't know how to do it because I've never encountered stuff like that before. So that's the overheating issues what I encountered. So now one more thing I found on my motor, or one of them, and I talked to another person and they said there's a common problem on those things too. That would be the camshaft wearing. So let me see if I can show it in this camera here. So this is tricky to show. I'm not sure if I can get this that it shows up on the video, but you can clearly see this cam lube is worn. There's a ridge here, right there. So it's has a wear right in the center of it. There's a total of 3 of those loops are worn just like that. Let's see if it shows up better like this. Probably not. But anyways, yeah, it is clearly, you know, how this thing hangs up right here. So I don't know why they do that. That's the first one I had, or one of the. So I dealt with a total of 3 different camshafts. It's the only one I had bad, and of course I had, lucky for me, I had spares. So I don't know why it does it. Maybe if I would see this, I'm a auto mechanic, and if I see this at a car doing it, there could be lack of oil change, cheap oil, or a problem with the lubrication, with the oil passages. Can't say much to it. I don't have any info. I just noticed that's what happened. Yeah, the engine will still run, but eventually it's gonna get worse. It's not yet to the point that it would start really disintegrating. It'll lose a couple of horsepower because the lift of the valve would not be as much as a camshaft that's not worn. So yeah, I'm not sure if this shows in the camera, but something to look for. Now the problem is if you're just about to buy one of those motors, this is nothing you can really check out, because you would have to take the valve cover off and possibly remove the whole rocker arm assembly in order to see that, but I kind of doubt that anybody who's selling a motor would let you do that, you know. This is something to look for. If you have one of those motors and you have to take it apart anyways, look for it. Because of course what happens is You take the motor apart, it's all covered in oil and it's gonna hide it. But then when you feel your fingers over it, even if you can't see it, you clearly can feel a ridge here. You know, that's not the only one, but it's the one that probably shows the best. This one here, the first one, same thing. It's worn out here. This one here too. It even got some scratch marks in there. I would almost say maybe this thing had run out of oil at one point in time, because this thing is actually has some grooves in here. So this one is really bad. You got a good one. Yeah, it's kind of strange because about half of them are worn, the other half are bad. This one here too has a ridge in there. Okay, so those are the problems I found. So I'm left with a bunch of junk parts. Just go in the metal bin. So worn out camshaft you can't fix. And problem is, good luck finding one. You can't buy them new. I believe you cannot buy them new anymore, but if you could, they're probably going to be north of 300 bucks. I don't know if it's worth putting that much money in a motor that's like 10-15 years old. I don't know. Anyways, that's what I got. Thank you for watching.